Have you ever been in a season where you felt like your heart was just heavy? Not a anxiety type of heavy, not a depression type of heavy, but a heaviness that may be calling you to do something differently. It's like a pulling, but it feels heavy because it's forcing you out of your comfort zone. If this sounds like you, then this episode is definitely something that you want to stay and watch because we're going to talk about that today on Activate Your Destiny.
Wake up, it's time to activate. Wake up, it's time to activate. You know there is more that God has in store. You've been so used to hiding and used to inviting the fear, guilt, and doubting that keeps you from thriving. But wake up, it's time to activate it. Wake up, it's time to activate it. Activate your destiny. Time to activate it.
Welcome to another episode of Activate Your Destiny. My name is Destiny Faith McCoy. I am your host, and this is a show for called moms who want to find more clarity, courage, and activation in their lives. I personally distinctively remember a time, multiple times actually, where I have felt that heavy feeling, that urge to show up differently, to do things differently. And to be honest, I didn't always move quickly because it's uncomfortable. It felt like a stretching. I've been making a lot of different doughs lately. Thank you to my friends because I swore I was not going to do this stuff, but I might be stuck at this point. But when you're making the dough, depending on the recipe that you're making, you have to stretch it out. If I'm making pizza, right, for the kids, I have to stretch out the pizza dough. And if I compare that to like my actual life, I feel like the last couple of years have been a stretching. It's been an uncomfortable stretching because when you're stretching something and it's an inanimate object, it doesn't actually affect it. But imagine yourself being like pizza dough and you're trying to get it to a certain size. You're trying to get it to a certain level so that you can create what it is that you intended for it to become. So if you don't know, you're making pizza dough, and while it is rising and doing all that stuff, I'm not about to make this a whole pizza dough recipe, but it's in a ball, right? Until you do what you need to do, cut it up in the pieces and all the whole nine, and you have to push it out. You have to stretch it out to become the size of the pizza, right? So if I'm making individual pizzas for the kids, I don't need it to be that big. But if I need it to be a large pizza for our entire family, or an extra large pizza, there's a lot more stretching that I need to do in this process. And literally as I'm talking, because this is not even on my cards, but as I'm talking, it reminds me of like when God has a higher calling for us, which I do believe if you've been into this show, if you've been into any of my content, if you've been following along with me for a while, you know that like there's a certain type of mom that God is calling me to speak to. So if you're still watching this, you probably are that mom who has a huge calling on her life. And God is constantly stretching you, or he's ready to stretch you to get you to the point or the size or the formation of what he needs you to be so that you can walk out that calling. So if I decide I'm only comfortable enough to be a individual size pizza, that's what, like this big, then I can only go but so far. But when it gets to a point where God really wants us to wake up and stop using excuses and stop being stagnant and stop having, not having any consistency or structure in our homes and in our families, in our lives in general, then he starts stretching you more. If I got to become a large pizza because my calling is large, I got to go through a lot of stretching, right? So I looked up the definition of stretching, of course. I Googled it, and the AI thing actually gave a definition that fits exactly what I'm talking about perfectly. So I'm going to read it now. It said, it is embracing new experiences. To be stretched means to embrace new experiences, to be willing to take risk or try new things, that force adaptation and learning, which may be uncomfortable initially, but ultimately rewarding. If that's not powerful, I don't know what is. Like, to be stretched, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to no longer be comfortable, especially when you're being stretched to do something that God is calling you to do. And it forces you to adapt. It forces you to maneuver, to change, to make adjustments according to where he's calling you to be. And to learn in the process. It says it forces adaptation and learning, which may be uncomfortable initially. As I've said so many times, there is nothing comfortable about being 100% sold out to what God is calling you to do. It's not comfortable because he's constantly stretching us. He's constantly, moving and shaking us and molding us into what is required for us to be who he's called you to be. But it's ultimately rewarding. Nothing that we can come up with will be as rewarding as us following what God has for us. Right? So that heavy feeling that we've been talking about in the beginning, it could very well just be that God is requiring you to stretch. He's requiring you to show up differently. There's a saying, nothing changes if nothing changes. And I've heard it so many times, but more recently, over the summer, I had to implement it, like, seriously, in my own life. I had to show up differently for me to get a different result. I cannot continue saying, oh, I want this to be different in my business, but I don't want to be in different environments. I don't want to talk to different people. It's almost like making a mistake over and over again and then thinking that there's going to be a different result, like the definition of insanity, right? But oftentimes we don't look at it like the definition of insanity. We just look at it like comfortability. I'm just gonna, stay here because this is as good as it can get. But I fully believe that, like, in this season, God is trying to show us that this is not as good as it could get. If we lock in, if we do what we need to do, if we are intentional with our time and intentional with the way that we are raising our families, and we are no longer, hiding, and we're using what he has given us, then things can change, right? Nothing changes if nothing changes. So Psalms 119 and 133 says, order my steps in thy word, and let not iniquity have dominion over me. So it's not a matter of us changing on our own or stretching on our own. It's a matter of depending on God. He can stretch us. And although it's not comfortable, it's still going to lead to the best results because he's the one guiding us, right? So there comes a point in life where you have to realize that you cannot operate the same way. You have to realize that what I am doing, whether in motherhood, in my marriage, in my business, in my career, in homeschooling, like whatever my roles are, I cannot continue to operate this way if I want things to be different. So let's talk about motherhood specifically, because that's what we do. We talk about being moms, but not only being moms. But a lot of what we are being called to do, first of all, it starts at home, right? But if we don't get our home in order, then it does impact everything else that God is asking us to do. So, for example, if you are someone who just wings it every single day, like I see that a lot in the homeschooling community. I'm just going to get up, and they get up when they feel like it. I get up when I feel like it. We eventually get to breakfast. We eventually do this. We eventually do that. And while that does work for some families, like for me specifically, it does not work for me and my family because I am being called to multiple different things. So if everybody gets up and does whatever they feel like doing for the majority of the day, how much of that time has been wasted? If there is no attempt at consistency or some type of structure in my household, then that directly impacts me doing other things. I can't sit here and record these videos if there's no structure. I cannot homeschool if there's no structure without it, carrying over all day. And that's not what I want. That's not what my family wants. And that is not what God wants for me in this season. And if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, and if you've been following along with me for a while, you know that there's a specific mom that God is talking to in all of this. So if you are a mom that's like, I don't feel like I'm being called to anything else, then this might not be for you. But for those of you who do know that God has put a lot within you and that you have things that you want to do, you just don't know how to do it, then it starts here. It starts with being like, I have to have some type of structure in my day. Pause right there, mama, because if this episode is hitting home, I guarantee you it is not by accident. This is the season where God is activating you. And guess what? You do not have to walk that out alone. That is why I created Mom School, a coaching community built to help you get your confidence back, find your rhythm, strengthen your faith, and finally create a home that feels like peace. Inside, you are not just surviving motherhood, you are becoming the woman that God has created you to be. With clarity, with strategy, and with most of all, support. If you are tired of feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and disconnected from who you are supposed to be, it is time to move. It's time to get activated. And Mom School is the space where moms transform from the inside out. Click the link in the description and join us today. It is time to activate your destiny. I have to have some type of consistency in my day. And the great thing is, while we talk about it here, we act it out in Mom School. Actually, this month specifically, the theme is you control your day. So a lot of times we are spending so much time catering to everybody else that we don't realize that we're still the ones in charge. And I know in my home specifically, I've had to make some adjustments too to regain my authority. Like, hey, hold up. I'm the one in charge here. And I'm the one that God is holding responsible for raising you all up and doing everything that he's called me to do. So therefore, I have to restructure some things. I have to reclaim my authority around here so that we can move forward into the promises of God, into like the blessings that he has for us. Because a lot of times us not doing this is directly getting in the way of what he's trying to do for us. Another example is, am I limiting my child's ability to interact with the world because I'm comfortable in my bubble? If you never want to leave the house, if you never want to interact with anybody else, if you never want to open yourself up and be vulnerable, that directly impacts your child. There's a misconception, again, for homeschool moms specifically, that if you homeschool your kids, they don't have a social life. First of all, that's a myth. It's very inaccurate. But I think that is true also if you're not homeschooling. Because if the only interaction that your kid gets is in school, then that may not work either. They need more of a well-rounded experience so that they can go out into the world and feel equipped for everything that they may encounter. But if you as mom are just comfortable, like in my house, I never want to do anything unless you guys come to me or unless it's in, the vicinity, like a 2-mile radius or things like that. And it also goes back to structure. Like if it's a matter of I can't get everybody out of the house because it stresses me out, so I'm just not ever going to leave the house, then maybe let's go back to the structure. We've done scheduling audits in Mom School also. And it's just a matter of, let's look at your schedule. What do you do between, 6 a.m. and noon? Can anything be adjusted? Is any time being wasted? Can you delegate some things? Can you get some help? Like, let's look at it from a person that's not in it with you day to day. And let's see, like, what's going on? Because there's a good chance that if your heart's desire is for you guys to get out more or to do things more, you can do it because you're the one that's in control of your day. All right. Another thing, I'm refusing to be consistent in my health journey so that I have the stamina to handle my assignment. I got to work on this too. The consistency in my health journey so that I have the stamina to carry out my assignment. Whether that looks like the gym, water, eating better, take like your steps, whatever your goal is, we got to be more consistent. And I know just thinking about the fact that if I don't get my life together, I won't be able to fully do what he's calling me to do. That alone gives me the motivation to try to get myself together. Because what I don't want is for all of these years of prayer and all of this preparation to get at the door that God wants to open for me, and then I can't handle it. I don't want that. And I'm sure that you don't either. So we got to show up differently. We got to do something different. And not just because it's the new year, because everybody's about to be in the gym, but how are you going to plan to be consistent? Another scenario that came to me while I was taking notes for this is, am I struggling with teaching my kids independence because of my own trauma responses? So when we're talking about showing up differently, are you allowing your kids to depend on you every waking moment of the day for every single thing because it makes you feel more comfortable, because you feel like you're trying to do something differently, or you're trying to show up differently, which is good. That's what we're talking about. But what is it going to cost you, right? So if you're the only person that can do anything for your child without them learning independence, especially as they get older, then that weighs on you. That's extra physical, energy. That's extra mental capacity that is being used where you could just let some of it go, right? Nothing changes if nothing changes. But so many of these scenarios, they come up and they cause us to feel heavy and uncertain when we get to a point where it's like, I know something needs to change. And maybe it feels overwhelming. Maybe there's a tug of war in knowing that, like, I need to change these things, but it makes me uncomfortable. But how much more peace would you have if you just begin to work on one of these, or one of whatever is speaking to you in this moment today, one at a time? You don't have to try to change everything all at once, because that's where the overwhelm stems from. But one small thing, if you relate it to struggling with teaching your kids independence, maybe start there, depending on how old they are. Can they at least help you, pick up their toys off the floor? Are they old enough to make their own sandwich for lunch so that you get a moment? Are they old enough and capable enough, which they probably are, if they can follow you to the bathroom, they can understand mommy just needs 2 minutes to use the bathroom in peace. If you can relate to being consistent or inconsistent on your health journey, get an accountability partner. Join Mom School, because we are big on accountability partners. We're big on setting goals and sticking to them and holding each other accountable. If you are relating to not feeling comfortable doing things with other people outside of the house, maybe make a play date with a family member. Start there. Start with the cousin, something. Say hi to the mom at the library. Small steps add up to big results over time. What will your step of activation be? You can call a friend, wake up 30 minutes before your kids, and spend time with God. One step can start to chip away at the heaviness that you are feeling. And one step allows God to begin to pour into you more as you relinquish all of these other things. This episode was a tough one. It was a tough one because it points out a lot of the things that us as moms are comfortable with. But they also point out the things that are causing us to stretch. So if you're related to the beginning of this episode and there's something on the inside of you, something that is saying, I desire more for my life. I know that God has more for me. Then think about it. What is one step of activation that you need to implement today? Share it in the comments with us. If you're listening to it, you can comment there as well. Let me know so that we can hold you accountable. Let us know in the comments what your step of activation will be today, because we don't want that to be a feeling that is just constantly eating us alive. We want to be able to move forward this year. We want to move forward with activation. We want this year to be the year that we're no longer stagnant, the year that we are doing or beginning to do what God has called us to do, so that we can see a change. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Of course, this episode was brought to you by Mom School. It is my coaching community where we come together, and everything that we talk about in these episodes that we bring to your attention, we actually put into action with an amazing community of other moms who know that with God, we are able to get through anything, and we do it together. We are implementing change in our homes. We are laying foundations. We are stepping forward in faith and doing everything that God has called us to do. If this episode spoke to you, make sure you subscribe, you like, you share it with another mom friend who you know needs to hear it as well. And let me know, what step of activation are you going to take today? I will see you guys next week.